Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are fine. In our lecture today, we will discuss chapters 15 to 16 in Wuthering Heights, a novel by Emily Bronte. So, regarding to chapter 15. In this chapter of Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, we will discuss the summary of the chapter that includes the following: Heathcliff's visit to Catherine when she is ill, Catherine's and Heathcliff's reunion, and Edgar attacks Heathcliff. Also, in this chapter, we will discuss the commentary of it that contains Lockwood and Millie's narration, foreshadowing Catherine's ghost. Catherine asks Heathcliff forgiveness, and Catherine's collapse and Millie's feelings. Also, in chapter 15, the main characters are Catherine, Heathcliff, Edgar, Nellie, and Lockwood. Setting, place, Thrushcross Grange. Time, years before 1801. Now, moving on to the summary of chapter 15. Actually, the summary of chapter 15 includes three important points. The first point is about Heathcliff's visit to Catherine. 4 days later, Nellie delivers the letter, while the rest of the household is at church. Catherine is close to death and cannot even hold it. On her part, Nellie tells her it is from Heathcliff, that is to say, the letter. But before Nellie can call him to the room, he is lurking around the Grange. Heathcliff bursts into the room. The other important point is Catherine's and Heathcliff's reunion. So when Catherine sees him, she claims that both Edgar and he have broken her heart. She laments dying while she is still alive and longs for them never to be parted. Here we have an emotional reunion, actually, of sorts, takes place and they embrace. However, after the embrace, Heathcliff speaks harshly to Catherine, saying, "You deserve this. You have killed yourself." Distraught Catherine sobs that, "I forgive you. Forgive me." Holding her responsible for breaking both of their hearts. Heathcliff, on his part, considers her the murderer of both of them and tells her, "I forgive what you have done to me. I love my murderer, but yours, how can I?" Moving on to the third important point in this chapter, which is about Edgar's attack to Heathcliff. Well, during their reunion, Edgar returns from church services at this time, but as Heathcliff prepares to leave, Catherine begs him to stay. He consents. On her part, Nellie cries out, Edgar quickens his pace. Catherine collapses, and as Edgar bursts into the room, Heathcliff puts Catherine's body into Edgar's arms, begging him to take care of her before he attacks Heathcliff. Nellie makes Heathcliff leave, promising to give him word about her condition in the morning. Now, after giving a brief summary for chapter 15, we will move on to the commentary of this chapter. Well, in the commentary of chapter 15, we will discuss four important points. The first point is about Lockwood and Nellie's narration. So, ironically, at the start of the chapter, Lockwood claims Nellie to be a very fair narrator. Yet, he has proven himself to be a bad judge of character, so his words should not be all that reassuring for the discerning reader. So, at the beginning of chapter 15, Lockwood questions the reliability of Nellie's narration by asking her to be a very fair narrator. However, in this, he proves himself to be a bad judge of character. Accordingly, the second important point in chapter 15 is the foreshadowing of Catherine's ghost. So, what Catherine says and does not say reveals telling and compelling information about her character. She tells Heathcliff, "You and Edgar have broken my heart," placing the blame at their feet. But while she is being open and honest with Heathcliff, not once does she say she regrets marrying Edgar. Her comments, however, about not being at peace and about Heathcliff's happiness when she is cured foreshadows her ghost walking the world for 18 years, hunting Heathcliff. So in this chapter, we have Catherine is close to death. She is placing the blame of her misery at Edgar's and Heathcliff's feet. Also, while she has been honest to Heathcliff and her love for him, she never says that she regrets marrying Edgar because she wanted the two. Obviously, she wanted Edgar, his love and social class, and at the same time, she wanted Heathcliff and his love. She told Heathcliff that she won't rest in peace after her death, and this will affect his happiness, foreshadowing to the appearance of her ghost walking the world for 18 years to hunt Heathcliff. And here again we have the Gothic supernatural element represented by Catherine's ghost that will appear for 18 years to hunt Heathcliff. Okay, now I will move on to the third important point in chapter 15, which is about Catherine asks Heathcliff forgiveness. Well, after rambling for a while, Catherine begs forgiveness, but Heathcliff cannot or will not give it. Perhaps this lack of forgiveness is what haunts him. So the memory that he did not fully forgive her on her deathbed may be the worst of all the terrible things he has done in his life. On her part, Catherine herself alludes to this possibility when she says, "If you nurse anger, that will be worse to remember than my harsh words." Perhaps only in her last moments of life does Catherine come to a true understanding of love. Lastly, in chapter 15, the fourth important point is Catherine's collapse and Nelly's feelings. And regarding to Catherine's collapse, at the end of this chapter, Catherine collapses into Heathcliff's arms. During that time, Nelly thinks Catherine has died, and she remarks, "Far better that she should be dead than lingering a burden and a misery maker to all about her." As a matter of fact, these cold and callous comments reveal the truth about Nelly and her feelings. Just as Heathcliff giving Catherine's body to Edgar, placing Catherine's needs ahead of his own, reveal the truth about the depths of his love. For Nelly, Catherine's death will be a blessing, a lessening of a burden for Heathcliff. Catherine's death is the beginning of his own personal hell. So that was Nelly's feelings towards Catherine's death. Moving on to chapter 16. In this chapter of Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, we will discuss the summary of it that includes the death of Catherine and the birth of Cathy, Heathcliff, Edgar, and Catherine's corpus, along with the commentary of this chapter that contains the two losses of Edgar, Heathcliff's appeal, and the sincerity of Edgar's love. On the other hand, the main characters of this chapter are Edgar, Catherine, little Cathy, Heathcliff, and Nelly. Setting, places, we have Wuthering Heights, Thrushcross Grange, and the Moors. Time, many years before 1801. Now, what about the summary of chapter 16? As a matter of fact, the summary of chapter 16 includes two important points. The first point is about the death of Catherine and the birth of Cathy. So, at midnight that night, Catherine's daughter Cathy is born 2 months prematurely. 2 hours later, Catherine dies. In the morning, Nelly seeks Heathcliff to tell him the news, but he is already aware of the situation. He is angered that Catherine did not mention his name in her dying moments, and is despondent over losing her. He simultaneously curses her spirit while lamenting his loss. The second important point in this chapter is about Heathcliff, Edgar, and Catherine's thoughts. Edgar, on his part, watches over Catherine's body by day, and Heathcliff watches over it by night. Heathcliff replaces a lock of Edgar's hair from the trinket around Catherine's neck with some of his own. Nellie, on her part, finds the strands of Edgar's hair and ends up intertwining both his and Heathcliff's with hers. To everyone's surprise, Catherine is buried in the churchyard by a low wall just feet from the moors that she likes very much. Moving on to the commentary of chapter 16. So, in this commentary, we will discuss three important points. The first point is about the two losses of Edgar. As a matter of fact, Edgar suffers two losses in this chapter. The first one is the loss of his wife, Catherine. And the second loss is Thrushcross Grange, his inheritance, because of the birth of his little Cathy, meaning that the birth of a non-heir, because Cathy is not a male, she is not Edgar's heir, and complicated laws end up leaving Thrushcross Grange to Isabella and then to her son. This is not to suggest that Edgar does not love Cathy. He adores her, and she is his world. He just hates the fact that his rival, that is to say Heathcliff, may end up with his property. On the other side, the second important point in the commentary of chapter 16 is Heathcliff's appeal. So, with the shock of Catherine's death, Heathcliff implores her to haunt him. He appeals her spirit, saying, "I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul." Here, Heathcliff is clearly devastated by the death of his own true love. And although Heathcliff has done dastardly deeds throughout the text, most readers tend to sympathize with him and the loss he is feeling after Catherine's death. For Heathcliff, everything is about Catherine. At the beginning of the novel, although Heathcliff got mistreatments almost from everyone, he didn't care because Catherine was with him. He tolerates everything for her. However, later, when Catherine declares that she won't marry Heathcliff because this would degrade her, and that she accepted to marry Edgar, Heathcliff left with bitterness and decided to revenge upon everyone, including Catherine. The last important point in the commentary of chapter 16 is the sincerity of Edgar's love. So, on his part, Edgar is devastated too, but by burying Catherine near her beloved moors, Edgar demonstrates both the depth of his love for his wife as well as insight into understanding her character. He wants Catherine to be happy and at peace, and this is one final gesture he can give to show his love. That was the end of our lecture today. For further reading, please refer to these references. Next lecture, I will discuss chapters 17 to 18 in Wuthering Heights. Thank you very much for your time and good luck.